Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Tahoe vlog. 3 months later, we are here with sport dietitian Dina Griffin. It's taken a while to get this on the schedule, but we're here and we're doing it. And, the time has just allowed more memories and information to permeate, I think, and all that stuff. So, Dina, thank you so much for joining on the Zoom for this vlog about Tahoe nutrition and hydration.
Thank you, Kim. It is fun to have had the time actually to reflect a little bit more on the nutrition, all that stuff from your Tahoe race and all the stuff you did beforehand to prep. So yeah, thanks for having me on to chat a bit about it.
Awesome. Well, we've got an outline here to kind of work through, and we're thinking, what would be helpful for people watching? Maybe they're going to do Tahoe 200 or another 200 or a long ultra. So hopefully you can learn from things that went well, mistakes that I made, all that good stuff. So Dina, I met back April 2021. It seems like a really long time ago. When we first started working together for the first round of Tahoe before it got canceled and then postponed to June 2022. Dina ended up coming to Tahoe to crew and pace like 40 some miles or so. So Dina had some firsthand experience, and I'm excited to chat about all that went down with nutrition hydration.
Yes, we were afforded, is the word I'll use, afforded extra time to prepare for the Tahoe 200. I mean, unfortunately, right, with the circumstances in 2021, but I mean, I don't know that we would have changed too much, with that extension of time, but it was awesome to have, I think, for both of us, right, extra time to try out some things or just repeat some things and ensure some of what had been planned would be workable, or just, the extra time that we all have prior to races to use that towards effective nutrition planning. If we have the time, that's extra great. So where should we start, Kimmy?
Well, I think probably real quick, it'd be helpful just to give maybe your background credentials, because I think that's important to share before we jump into the outline here with Tahoe.
Oh yeah, thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, so my credentials, I mean, I'm a board certified sport dietitian and a registered dietitian. So, a lot of people don't know really that there is a difference between nutritionists and dietitians, but there is a lot of educational background differences, the credentialing that you have to go through. But yeah, so I work out of Boulder, Colorado. My company name is Nutrition Mechanic, but I work with athletes all over the country and in the world for that matter. But, my passion sets are endurance athletes, working with female athletes in particular, and especially in the ultra crowd. So I'm happy to have my own personal experience with ultra stuff, and then, the science being embedded in nutrition and sports science. And then we have all the stuff that we learn in real life that we don't have, a study to necessarily support. It's just so hard to mimic real life in a laboratory research setting. So we've got to marry all of these things together. But yeah, in brief, sport dietitian, registered dietitian, and I do dabble in some ultra stuff myself. So that is a bit about me.
Awesome. And she's also the co-host of an awesome sport nutrition podcast called Inside Sports Nutrition. See the sign back there. Check it out everywhere podcasts are streaming.
Handcrafted signs. from the Etsy shop that everyone should check out.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So first thing we've got up on our list is the process of figuring out what could, would, should work during Tahoe 200.
Yes. You want me to take that
Yeah, sure. We could
and
bounce
run with it a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay.
Run. Go run.
All right. Well, here I am running. I mean, so because we had interacted first, originally we had about almost 5-6 months before the original Tahoe 200 in 2021. So that was so awesome to meet you and have extra time. To anyone who's new to endurance racing or ultra racing, the more time you have to prepare not only the training and all the logistics and things, but the nutrition piece, the more able we are to test a number of things. So part of our process and my process was just learning you as an athlete, things like your background, your food preferences, what you had been consuming in training prior to us meeting, things you might have been challenged with, struggles. I mean, everything from that to like, what kind of pack are you wearing? And do you have flasks? And like, what sport nutrition do you tend to lean towards? So it's a lot of information gathering in the beginning, and then just knowing your experience with ultra events, kind of building from there. So some runners have a lot of history of GI distress, or they just struggle with getting in hydration, or all these things that come up during our initial discussions. And so I think, like for you, Kim, you didn't have much in the way of a history of gastrointestinal distress, so that was good, right? We didn't have to do a whole lot of fixing right in the beginning, but there were, through your logging process, there were things that I could see that we could enhance as far as timing of nutrition or amount of nutrition, or what we're consuming before runs, and then of course the type of nutrition. So I'm just speaking generally of some of those opportunities that come up when we first started working together, for anyone who's starting to look at this more closely for their own ultra racing or for other 200s. Just like, where are you at? How are the things working for you? Have you even thought about it? And then trying to align stuff with what the event would bring to you, meaning like, where are the aid stations? What are you going to be self-sufficient with? What can we provide to you as crew, and all of those things. But during those months of you training, we were able to start testing different products and timing and so forth. So I'll pause there because I think it's interesting to hear from you what you sensed as far as progression in the nutrition piece, or the things that you felt were areas that you made change or benefited from, or maybe not benefited. It was maybe just keeping some things going that you had already been doing.
Yeah, I think probably one of the most valuable things was keeping the food log. That was super helpful because it just gave, great feedback for you to look at, and then also for me to track. I think over the course of, ended up being a very long time, but able to look back at that, I think that was really good. Stopping Tailwind, I remember using that for a while, not really understanding the purpose of it, and then transitioning to using Scratch for electrolytes. So I think that was a pretty pivotal point of the whole process.
Yes, a good to bring up the logging, because that is something I highly recommend. for people, I mean, there's like day-to-day nutrition logging, just so you can see, especially if you're working with someone or thinking of working with someone, like, are you getting in enough fuel? Are we meeting your micronutrient needs and so forth? But around your training runs is starting to capture all that. So if you were out for 5 hours, what did you consume before, during, and after? Are we supporting nutritionally your adaptations to the training? So that you show up on race day healthy, fit, gut has been trained to take all these calories. But then specifically, like, what are the products or foods that we're using, or liquids? And is that going to work, in what proportion or what ratio, or does it work for you as an individual athlete? So the tailwind example, I just didn't see that as being a primary calorie source for you. I don't know if we want to spend any time on that, but yeah, switching to a more purposeful hydration product like the Scratch, I think, was super helpful for this setting, Kim, because then it let us explore some other liquid nutrition fueling products and keep kind of the hydration side a little bit separate. Nonetheless, the logging was so helpful, and you were so great at doing logs, even though it can be a pain in the butt. But we have all that history, right? And even through that whole process, being able to reflect, like, what'd you do on that, that longer day back in whatever month. We could go back and look, so that we could take pieces and apply some of that stuff for race day, or a lot of that stuff. Do you want to mention the I'll call it database of sorts, where you categorized your foods?
Oh yeah, definitely. Because I think that was probably very helpful, especially for crew during Tahoe. Admittedly, I did push back on you a little bit when you wanted to do this, because I just didn't want to take the time to do it. But we put together a spreadsheet, basically categorized food that worked like really well. Something like maybe I grab it from the aid station the first thing, or like I would pack it in my pack as a first preference. And then there's a second column that was like, okay, it works, but it's not my favorite, but it's not really bad. This is an option. And then the third column was like, no, I don't like it, or upsets my stomach, or whatnot. And then from there, we took the list. And since I volunteered at Bigfoot 200 this summer before, I'd known what the aid stations were generally going to have. So we had that list, and then tried to highlight, what was going to be available at aid, what could we bring from the crew house, what could I bring from New Jersey when I was packing.
Yes. And I don't know if you'll maybe be able to show a screenshot of that at some point, or post something like that. But I think, yeah, it's an investment of time to create these lists and things, but it is helpful, just thinking of crew, or because in any kind of ultra race, at some point, our brains as racers or participants, we get a little like, we're just a little tired, or very tired. And so doing whatever it takes to help the crew understand some of the basics, so that they're not even offering a food that you despise, right? Because that's a waste of time. So that list making, super helpful for categorizing preferences, and like you're saying, what aid stations should have, or we think they'll have, versus like, we've got to bring this on our own, or when we get to the race destination in the day leading up or during the race, these are things that we can make on the fly. to provide some fueling to you throughout. So that was super cool to have. And then that was something that you could work on during training as well, or things that we could test out, like, oh, did you try, remember the candy?
Oh,
Like
yeah.
we might want some simple sugar. I don't know. Do you like the Sour Patch Kids or the Twizzlers? So you could try these things and be like, no, actually, that neither.
I know the candy was hard to eventually get down to one because I'm not a huge candy person, but the Swedish Fish eventually did the trick.
Yes. So I think along with that is just bringing up the point back to, types of fuel or food. So, I mean, typically with ultras, unless we're a professional elite racer, our overall intensity is lower than, let's say, a 5K run. And so our tolerance ability to take more whole foods instead of subsisting on energy gels 100% of the time, or 80% of the time, we can explore as ultra runners and 200 milers, like what kind of whole foods work for us. What ones do we like? What whole foods, like quesadillas or breakfast burritos, sandwiches, things like this. How does that taste during a long training run? Do we think it could be something that would work, but really getting used to trying to nibble whole foods, because the overall race intensity is lower, we can tolerate that stuff. We might still have individual nuances to work around, or thinking of time of day, we may not want, I'm trying to think of an example, like you may not want a greasy whatever at 10 in the morning, but you might want something a little bit more fatty, proteiny, heavier in the dark hours of the race. And so all those things are sometimes not thought of until we're in the moment or in the race. So that was one of the things we, attempted to work on, but of course we didn't mimic 100% everything that the race course would provide. Nonetheless, I guess the point there just being having a variety of whole foods can do wonders for us ultra runners, especially with 200 milers when you're out there for days, right? It's just not realistic to try and eat only a couple things over the course of 3-4 days.
Yeah, totally. And I think that, looking ahead to one of the next bullet points about, we really shifted after like 1 or 2 aid stations of it just wasn't working with the stuff that they had available or lack thereof. And then you guys really pivoted as a crew to turning the crew house into like a food factory of pumping out food. It was crazy how much you kept coming back with to the checkpoints where you were meeting me, because I don't think I really ate much from the aid stations after mile like 30 or so, maybe 50. I think it was 50 when you guys started bringing food from the crew house. But yeah, I think that, it really made all that work beforehand pay off, because then, you guys were able to look at, well, okay, here's the things that we can make that's going to work. And I'm so glad. I'm so glad, because the aid stations weren't really doing it.
Yeah. And again, that's individual preference, right? Because there are some athletes who thrive off aid station food, no matter, like they're just machines, right? And can eat anything. I would say that is not the norm unless you're very experienced. You've done a ton of these kind of races, and you're, just like, oh, I can eat like a machine. But yeah, for this particular race, we did as crew provide a number of things. Again, having variety for you, and we can go over some examples. But to your point, Kim, I mean, yeah, it was noticed early on the need to supply you some additional fueling options, and we just kicked into gear, or like you're saying, like food factory, every time we had an opportunity to go back to the house. And we were so grateful to have, a nice kitchen and access to grocery store where we could get supplies. So this is stuff, if you're newer to 200 milers, just thinking of the crew, what do they need to know about you? Can they make certain things or buy certain things to help you fuel during the event? And some of this, right, Kim, I mean, we weren't communicating all of the details to you, like, oh, I went to Safeway and got, or 50 miles from now we're going to have this, that, and the other thing, because that it wasn't important in the moment to convey that to you. But on the side, the crew was trying to organize and think ahead, especially forecasting timeline, where you'd be when, and maybe what kind of food you'd want or not want. So I think as we say this out loud, there are a lot of things that come to mind that we take for granted as newer runners, or maybe not in this particular race setting yet.
Yeah, totally. And I know you guys were also communicating the stuff that I didn't like, which I'm sure I was being a pain about, but I was having a hard time, I don't know, second or third day. Anything that was dry, I was like, I can't do it,
Yeah.
So you guys were getting creative with finding stuff that was a little bit easier to get down.
Well, and also remember you had a little bit of burning or roughness in the mouth. I can't remember if that happened from something in particular, or it's just like, we breathe more with our mouth open, and maybe there was some other, do you remember like what brought that on?
Yeah, I think it was like an allergic reaction to running is what happened.
And we were not going to accept any, failing out of the race. So it's like, well, all right, we'll adapt. Which means we provided more liquid nutrition at aid stations. So this is kind of getting into what actually happened.
Yes.
Delving into that a little bit more.
Yes. That was a great thing to bring up, because that was one of the most valuable nutrition item was the liquid nutrition. Of you guys are bringing like the ready to drink bottled shakes, like stuff like Orgain. And then also you were like the smoothie queen of bringing these lovely smoothies in shaker bottles to the aid station. I think almost every aid, right? I think it was almost every aid station that was having at least one or two of those.
Yeah. That seemed to be effective for you to help you get in calories more quickly, because chewing and stuff like that takes longer.
You can tell the people.
I mean, some people are slower eaters.
It's true.
I don't know which way
chewing lessons.
So yeah, having liquid nutrition, like you can get in a fair amount of calories without the exhaustion, of chewing for you. You could focus on other things, and as crew, it's easy to sneak in your carbohydrates and protein in that drink. And visually, you didn't have to see all that, because I think this is the other thing that happens from my experience too, is just seeing a plate of food, you're like, oh my gosh, it's too much. That looks gross, whatever. Things come into our brain. But if we're jamming it all into a smoothie, you don't see like the banana, the protein powder, the strawberries, the milk, it's all blended up. And so you can get in an easy 400, 500 calories as a reload, at those aid stations. So that was super helpful. And I'm so glad that you were able to get those down and not have any problems.
Yeah, I mean, otherwise it would have taken an hour and a half for me to eat probably 5
Oh, yeah.
food.
Oh, yeah. But we learned from you too. So this is stuff I think as crew, right? We're pick up on your sensitivity. Like I knew you were a slower eater, Kim. I knew you. I mean, you're not so much a foodie where you're like, ooh, turkey and avocado, can't wait. So those were things like we just had to try and enhance everything we could, either to get you to eat it or make sure it was like the most palatable it could be. And so there were a few times what we made was too dry, right? Like the leftover chicken and the tortilla, it was just drying out. So like, can we mash avocado or hummus or what do we put in that? Or let's just trash that idea and switch to other options, and that's where some of the other variety, we tried to bring that in as best as we could. I mean, the peanut butter jam sandwiches were a staple for a long time. That seems to be a staple often, but trying to do other things like some bacon on its own, right? Or a different, like a pancake sandwich or
Oh yeah.
like turkey with avocado, or just trying to do different combos for you to have something else to taste and try our best to get in some fuel. And this goes to the other piece I know is on our list as well, is just like trying to nibble throughout because you eat slower and that's okay, but trying to have you eat like on a hourly basis, the time it would take you to eat 150 calories, we just have to be eating all the time, right? So we realized, let's just make these shorter intervals. And maybe that interval is, in my mind, like, oh, good, that's 120 calories ish that we're going to eat every 25, 35 minutes, and you can adjust based on terrain if you're running versus what the thing is, if it's easier to eat or not, try to marry all those things together. But the nibble approach was better than like a big old sandwich. This is separate from the aid station food. So this is in between the aid stations. Just having you try to eat more often and nibble those calories.
Yeah, I think by the end of the race, it was like every 25, 30 minutes. And that was something you guys did that was so helpful, was you set like alarms on your phone. I don't know if you did, you probably had an internal clock, but the other girls set alarms on their phone and it would like go off just to remind, okay, it's time, let's eat something.
Yeah.
Which I think was so important. It also brings up that like, probably the majority of runners do this, but it was really important to have all that food during the legs because the time that elapsed from aid station to aid station was so long. A lot of times it was 20, 25 miles, which would take 6, 8, 10 hours, depending on what part of the course it was. So that was something that you guys were so helpful with, was just like, okay, this is all stuff that we're going to bring and we're going to like hit it every 25, 30 minutes.
Yeah. Do you remember, just curious, I know it's been a few months, but are there things that stand out that you've reflected on? Like, this particular food did work better, or in hindsight, that option was probably not my most favorite. Is there anything you would change for next time?
I mean, some of these we mentioned already. Yeah, no, I heard that. Definitely, it is happening. I mean, I think it was like the couple times we did like tortilla with just chicken or just turkey, that was hard, just because it was dry. But no, the liquid nutrition was great. I think Robin had made like pancakes with bacon sandwich. That was weird,
Yeah.
but it worked because it was really easy to eat.
Yeah.
Now we've both since learned this, but the scratch super fuel at the end, we did that the last 10 miles because it was like a monster 2,500 foot climb. That works so well. And in the last couple of weeks, we were out in Montana together and we used the super fuel a lot during the big climb. So that's something probably I'm gonna keep doing for like really mountain stuff where it's hard. It's hard to like eat and hike and breathe at the same time, especially if you're like a flatlander at 9,000-10,000 feet. The super fuel was fantastic.
Excellent. Yes. Good. Highly recommend the super fuel for the reasons you just stated, other than it also being an awesome, unique source of carbohydrate. Whole other story. But yeah, the scratch super fuel I would put on the list for anyone doing a lot of climbing, mountain terrain, or just needing more liquid calories. I would rank that as one of the best products on the market.
Yes, highly recommend. I'm looking at the cheat sheet. This is probably why you're also asking that question. The hamburger that I had at mile, I have no idea what it was, 120, I think, was Spooner's Summit. 2 thumbs, way down. I broke like the cardinal rule of don't try anything new on race day. And I don't know what I was thinking. Yeah, mile 120, let's eat a hamburger. Didn't settle well. I think there are possibly some other variables playing into it. But that was probably the only GI distress issue, I think, of the whole race.
Yeah. So yes, the hamburger, I mean, I don't know. I wasn't at that age, so I don't know exactly the scene there, but I mean, everybody's eating them, what could go wrong? It wasn't something we had done during training. We could say, oh, it should be pretty benign. I don't, but it is potentially, it is a higher protein, higher fat thing. Maybe it could have been the fat element, just a lot of fat for the system to take in. Maybe it was too much calories, could have been some of the food you consumed prior to that. But yeah, unfortunately, you experience some diarrhea after that, which was not pleasant for you. I don't know if you want to speak any detail to that at this point.
Yeah, very, very unpleasant to have diarrhea during Tahoe 200.
Fun.
I mean, any race, yeah, but especially an event like Tahoe where, there aren't just porta-johns sitting around in the middle of the Tahoe rim trail. So infinite gratitude to the pacers who were with me during that, because it was very unpleasant. But we did troubleshoot and the anti-diarrheal kicked in like that. Kind of wish I tried it sooner. But yeah, and then later on in the race, like another 60 miles, I think it was mile 180 or something, my period started, which was a week early. That was very unpleasant as well.
Yes. Could be another reason why you had some GI distress, this tie between an inflammatory state of the body, a lot of stress in the body happening, so yes, that was another challenge that was gifted to you.
It was.
Strange choice of words.
I know. And now I tell everybody, always put a tampon in your running pack.
Yes.
You don't think you need it. You might, or a friend might. So
this is true. And maybe an anti-diarrheal tablet would be good.
I agree.
Help a friend. But other than that, I mean, I'm not trying to discount it, Kim. Like, other than that, it was no problem. But I mean, those were two significant things that happened. But GI distress is a big deal in ultra running. I think it's a little less of an issue in 200s, again, because we might be hiking a lot. Our overall intensity is a little lower, but we can still goof up nutrition and exacerbate some of that. So I was so pleased that you for everything we fed you, everything you were willing to eat. I mean, you seemed like you didn't have anything significant energy wise related to the nutrition specifically. Of course, I'm biased. And of course, you had fatigue. We had to work out how you would sleep, and you can talk to that a little bit here if you'd like. The altitude changes. So they're certainly staying on top of hydration and nutrition is key for getting to the finish line in one piece.
A lot of variables.
Yeah, a lot of variables.
I think sleep was probably one of the biggest variables, and I think the biggest unknown variable for me, because I'd never done a 200 before. So yeah, I think it'd be cool to chat a little bit about the whole sleep thing. It seems to be the hot topic in 200s of like, what's your sleep strategy? What works? What's the secret? What works well? And I don't really know what the best strategy is. I think the only way to find out is to keep doing these things and try different strategies. But the strategy we went in with was the thought of, okay, I'm going to stay up the whole first day, first night, go through the second day, and then try to sleep the second night and time it so that it's, whatever, 1, 2 in the morning. And then when you wake up, it'll be at sunrise for the third day. And that pretty much is what happened. I think I took one short, I don't even think I fell asleep, but I laid down when I was with you, mile 40 or not 40. What was it? You did 50 to 80, right?
50 to 80, yeah. So I think, it was probably around 75-ish,
Yeah.
70, 75-ish.
Yeah, that sounds right. It was the afternoon of the second day.
Yeah.
But yeah, it worked out that the Tahoe course this year was the 100-mile out back. So when we got to 100 miles at the Heavenly Ski Resort, I think we rolled in around 12 a.m. or 1 a.m. or something, and then slept for, I think, a few hours, 2 or 3 hours.
3 hours, yeah.
3 hours.
Yeah.
And an amazing sleep setup. We had a big SUV and brought like an inflatable camp mattress that went into the back because the back seats went flat. And I do feel bad. I still feel bad because I was really warm. I had on like a sleeping bag and an extra down blanket. And I was telling the crew, like, can you turn off the heat? And meanwhile, it's like 25 degrees out. They're freezing their buns in that car.
We stayed in the car with you the whole time. I will say that was challenging as crew member, right?
Yeah.
Nonetheless, you're so glad that you had that set up. It was perfect with time of day, in the wee hours of the night, the turnaround point. There were so many, and then getting up, with daylight ish. kind of.
Yeah.
But huge reset for you.
Yeah, it really was. I felt like a new person when I woke up. I was definitely despairing beforehand. I remember rolling into Heavenly and just being very mentally overwhelmed with like, just did 100 miles, but there's still 100 miles to go and we have to turn around and go backwards. But I remember waking up the next day, the sun was out. I went out with Grace, and that leg, like once we climbed up to Spooner Summit, we ran down the whole way. So that was a real mood booster. And I think after that, so then I needed to lay down, and I tried to do a dirt nap the next evening with Robin, but it was so cold. It was so cold. I had gotten into the emergency bivvy, but I was like shivering. So I don't think I didn't fall asleep at that point. And then when we got to Tunnel Creek, Robin and I, that night, it was like 12 or 1 in the morning. I did doze off in the aid station chair where it was like a war zone of just bodies everywhere. So I think I had slept for like 10, 15 minutes. And then we went through that third night, and the next morning, I think I slept at Brockway Summit for, I don't know how long you guys let me sleep.
I think it was half hour there at
Okay,
Brockway. Yeah.
it was Brockway. Yeah.
And then at the next one, I think, was
Tahoe.
it the next
Yes.
Tahoe City? You had an hour. I'm looking at my notes. An hour at Tahoe City
Yes.
because
Yeah.
we finally figured out cutoffs because we had some misunderstandings of cutoffs or miscommunication. So we were like, "Oh, you have time. You're tired. Let's do a little extra nap here." And then I think even at the next one, right? You just did a shorty rest.
Yes. Yes. That was the
Yeah.
final aid station.
Stephen Jones.
Stephen Jones. Yeah, there were 10 miles left. I think I
Yeah.
slept for a little bit. Probably could have just sucked it up and kept going, but it was nice to sleep a little bit more.
Yeah. Plus it was cold.
It was very cold. Yeah. That was a curveball. You know, I thought that there would be more opportunities to just like lay down on the side of the trail and sleep. But for me, it was very, very, I found it was too cold to do that. Because as soon as you stopped, you started like, you had to put layers on if you didn't already have them on. And it just was like very, very cold to sleep.
Yeah.
Naps.
You know, I'm just thinking of something, Kim, that we haven't talked about here, which would be the caffeine.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Because that is something, if you're going to sleep and you're sensitive to caffeine, like you can't put the caffeine too close to your anticipated nap, right? So for you, because you are sensitive to caffeine, it's a really potent stimulant for you. You know, we tried in that first day. Well, there was a lot of time, right? You used no caffeine in the beginning.
Yeah. I don't think I used any till I don't even know when it was, the third day, maybe?
I was trying to find that real quick, but yeah, I think maybe it was third day. Actually, you might. I think we used a little bit on day 2, but it was minimal, if any.
Probably one of those little caps.
Yeah, our magical capsules. But I would say, you know, after Heavenly, the turnaround, caffeine was certainly used much more, but still little for you, like relative caffeine use. It was maybe a lot for you, but for someone else, it might not have been much at all. Nonetheless, we were just trying to dose caffeine to not be too much at one time, space it out a bit so you had nice, steady, you know, relative steady boost, or at least trying to lessen the nervous system fatigue that happens, and then keep it not too close to when we thought you might take a nap. That seemed to be pretty effective.
Yeah. Strategic caffeine usage.
Yes, yes.
Cool. Well, I feel like we covered most everything, right? Am I missing anything?
I mean, I would just add, like the hydration. So as crew, we try to, of course, I think all crew does this, right? We check your bladder, you're in the pack, not your bladder, but the pack bladder and flask, replace those each aid station. But when it's cold, the struggle like to drink, but still wanting to honor thirst and not go too long without much fluids, that can just be, I think, impossible to say, like, you have to have this much from 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. You kind of just have to monitor, like, when did you last pee? How cold is it? Are you at least getting some sips with the food you're consuming? But I think you did pretty well given all of that, let alone just the 200 miles in front of you. So also along with that is that it wasn't just plain water you were drinking. You had the scratch hydration, the scratch super fuel. We used a little bit of the scratch clear, but predominantly your fluids, except for some water that you had in the bladder in the pack. That was the scratch products. And then you did get at some of the aid stations some soup, for liquid. You got some, I think we did like some cider at Tunnel. I can't remember now, but like you had a few other liquids throughout. So yeah, I just wanted to add that piece.
That's great.
But great job to you with your nutrition and hydration. It'll be exciting to see as you go forward what, things get further fine-tuned and adjusted depending on the events, whether it's organized race or your own creations and run ventures. It'll be fun to build on that and for you to take all this stuff forward.
Thank you, Dina. I appreciate that. Well, I would say, why don't we close with one question of what advice would you give to a runner who wants to do a 200? If you could only give one piece of advice.
For the nutrition specific, or?
We could leave it open-ended, but yeah, you can talk that nutrition, hydration, or something else.
I should probably stick in that realm versus getting all like woo-woo. I mean, okay, I'll leave out my bias, like you should work with a professional. I'll leave that out. But I would say the logging, noting, tracking for yourself as you go through training is, noting what it is you are doing nutritionally, so you have that data for yourself. It seems mundane. What's the point? It's too. But I honestly, it's one of the common themes I see as a helpful resource for ultra runners to really start honing in more on the nutrition, hydration piece, so that race day is, a better experience for you.
Yes, I think that's really good advice. And since you won't say it, I will say it, that if you're gonna do 200, it is really, any distance, but very beneficial to work with a qualified professional such as Dina Griffin. But seriously, I learned so much. You do such a great job because you teach. It's not just like telling the athlete what to do. So I feel like so much of this I'm going to carry on to the next stupid thing that I do. And I also got a great friend out of the whole thing. Dina's one of the most incredible people I know. So it's been a joy the last couple of years.
well, quite an honor for me to work with you. And yeah, I mean, I'm biased here because we've become good friends as well. But I mean, trying to keep that out just here for a second is for all of the growth that you can build on, right? Just from trying to honor health first and foremost, but that this element, even though again, it's not maybe our most favorite topic all the time, but it just can play such a big difference in all the things that we want to pursue and accomplish. So thank you, Kim. I'm so glad that reached out way back when, and appreciate this opportunity to reflect on the Tahoe 200.
Yes, I'm so glad we were able to finally get this on. So
Better late than never.
yes, well, all right, before we shut it down, can you tell people how they can connect with you, whether online or website, social media, whatever?
Oh yeah, nutritionmechanic.com is the website. I'm on Instagram, Nutrition Mechanic. But yeah, you can find my info either of those places. Thank you.
Awesome. Cool. All right. Well, thank you for tuning in. We appreciate you watching the Tahoe 200. I think this is probably what wraps up the vlog series for Tahoe. So
Okay.
it's been quite a ride. I'm glad we wrapped it up.
And thank you, Kim, for sharing on behalf of all of the followers and people
Okay.
to follow you in the world. I mean, it's just been so cool to learn, see the journey, learn from you. And gosh, I mean, what a resource you've been in many ways, I will say. So thank you for that on behalf of the world.
Thank you, world. I appreciate that. Amazing. All right, guys. Well, thank you again so much. And maybe we'll see you on the trails sometime soon.